Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our talk with Brad Thor and Chris Knopf. We're so glad to have you all here. And from the flurry of emails, I've been minutes. And then I'm going to reappear on the screen, having disappeared, and help with the Q&A at the end. So I have a little bit of housekeeping to do, starting by introducing myself. I should have done that right away. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm delighted to be the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum, which was one job 6 months ago and a whole different job lately. And this is one of a series of author talks that we had on the books. We're really looking forward to. Brad had been somebody who'd been wanting to have come talk at the Twain House for some time. We finally snagged him, and then COVID kicked in. But he, like everybody else, has been very cooperative about saying, yeah, let's do it online. Let's run with it. So we're very grateful to you for that, Brad. I have a little bit of housekeeping beyond my name. First of all, I just want to let you know what is going on at the Twain House lately. You know, we are a nonprofit organization. We're an independent private organization, so we're not run by the state or funded by the federal government. And so we've had to be very creative in the past few months about generating revenue because our tour is the house is our main source of revenue, and these public programs are another main source of revenue. So the staff, I'm very, very proud to be part of this staff, has really worked hard and done everything we can to keep the place active and engaging and lively, and boy, has our audience responded. And we're very grateful for that. One of the great developments is that in the past couple of weeks, we have reopened for public tours in a very limited, very safe way that has got the blessing of some very important health officials who came and toured the place and said, yes, you're doing it right, and continue doing it. So, and people have been responding in droves. It's been really, well, droves, as much drove as you're allowed these days. So again, we're grateful for that support. I will point out that during the course of this evening, now I know you all paid a registration fee to take part in this evening, and you get a signed copy of Brad's book and a commemorative postcard, which I haven't seen yet. I can't wait to see. And we'll ship those out to you. Most of you have already sent me your email address, your shipping address. If you haven't sent me your shipping address yet, please do, and I'll repeat my email again in the chat in a little bit. But throughout the program here, you'll see that green button that's below the three of us that says your support is vital to the Mark Twain House and Museum. That's a really true statement. Your support really is, and we very much appreciate your supporting us through the purchase of your ticket. If you are able and willing to do a little bit more, any gift, large or small, I tell you honestly, is genuinely appreciated by the entire staff of the museum and the Board of Trustees. So if you are able, we would be very grateful for your help in that regard. A little bit more, I want to just make sure you know that we do have a lot of upcoming programs, and you can also go back and watch our previous Crowdcast programs. Just go to our website, listen carefully to the name of the website. It's very complicated. It's marktwainhouse.org. And there's a special section on there for all of our virtual programs, so you can go and click on those and watch them to your heart's content. And just so you know, your books will be shipped out in the next few days. And I think I'm pretty much just ready to introduce our guests. So welcome, Chris. Welcome, Brad. Thank you for being here. Chris Knopf is well known to our Mark Twain House community. He's helped us out moderating a number of these discussions, and most recently, a couple weeks ago, was a presenter at our very successful, very exciting Writers Weekend. So we're always grateful for his help and support. But beyond that, he is an awesome writer. He has published 17 mystery thrillers, including the Sam Aquillo mystery series, for which I think he's best known. He has written short stories that have appeared in Hitchcock and Ellery Queen, and he's a really nice guy. I know he has some great questions for tonight, and a number of people will remember his long and distinguished career in advertising here in Connecticut, his firm with his wife, Mintz and Hoke. So welcome to you, Chris, and welcome to who I hope is the newest member of our circle of writers here at the Mark Twain House and Museum. We always say this is a writer's home and a home for writers. And Brad, I hope that you'll consider it part of your writing home moving forward. Brad Thor, 15 million books in print, more than 20 thrillers, including, more than 20 thrillers that feature Scot Harvath, who's the covert counterterrorism operative, and Near Dark is the latest in that series. There is so much to say about Brad Thor's work, his writing, and also just his life experience that has informed his work. He was recruited into the Department of Homeland Security's Red Cell program, which I hope you're going to talk a little bit about. Is that part of tonight? I hope. He shouted.
I got a chance to do that, yes.
In Afghanistan. And I would rather, and I'm sure you folks would rather, hear Chris and Brad talk about all of this than hear me continue. So with no further ado, please everybody join me in welcoming Chris Knopf and Brad Thor to the Mark Twain House and Museum. And please put your questions in the chat, in the ask a question area. You can chat among yourselves throughout the program, but your questions need to go down there and ask a question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that before the grand welcome. So once again, welcome and have fun.
Thank you, Jennifer. So, hi, Brad.
Hello, Chris.
Writers are always, have always been basically quarantined humans, and for the obvious reasons. But how has all this stuff affected your process, your writing life day to day? I'm sure everybody's going to want to know that.
Well, that's a great question. Actually, in all of the virtual events I've done for Near Dark, nobody's asked me that question, and it's really good. It's given me something to focus on because, as you know, as a fellow author, it really is about self-discipline and trying to cut out as many distractions as possible. If you want to see the cleanest office you've ever seen in your life, the cleanest garage, the cleanest closets, visit a writer on deadline, because they procrastinate like nobody's business.
Yes.
So in the beginning of the lockdown, it was really, I was able to just like a laser ignore everything else. And it's funny because I was behind the curve by a couple of months because I was just focused on finishing a project, the edits and a lot of the marketing and getting the next book that I'm going to be writing for next year going and stuff, that I was just like this. And then I picked my head up and there's all this pandemic stuff. It sounds crazy, but it is the way it is. You're right. Writers are really, it is a solitary profession to a certain degree, although I rely heavily on experts to help inform the details in my novels. So I talk a lot with people, but that's text and email and phone calls and stuff. I don't necessarily have to go outside the house. So my life hasn't changed. I make the same joke about the commute from the kitchen to my home office. Wow, it was really rough today. There was a couple of laundry baskets scattered in the way, looked like a car crash. So my routine hasn't changed that much, but I do have the kids around all the time, which is interesting. And they would have been in summer camps or summer jobs and stuff. So I'm trying to look at all of the things that are different as blessings, because I have two high schoolers. They're going to be going to college soon. I'm going to blink my eyes and they're going to be gone. So things that might have been challenges I look at as opportunities. I think that's probably the biggest thing now. And I've always said, one year I wrote 2 novels in a year. And I always said, if I just had a little more time, maybe I would do that again. So be careful what you wish for, because now I've got nothing but time, because we just, we don't go out to dinner. We don't travel. We don't do anything except runs to the grocery store and the pharmacy.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned experts. You're famous for having excellent information that's pretty authenticated, and your research is acclaimed. Do you love research, or do you love what it does for you, or both?
That's a great question. So I really do enjoy the research process. And with each novel, I try to find something I'm really excited about, because there's going to be one thing, whether it's a location, maybe a collection of locations, maybe it's a piece of information that I'm going to drill down on really, really hard, because I want to come up with stuff that my readers haven't seen before. In fact, one of the nicest compliments I get paid is people say, "Oh, I love to read your books with my laptop open," because I come across stuff that I feel can't be true, and I search it online, and there it is. In fact, I did a lot of research for one particular location. Camp David makes an appearance in the novel. And a friend of mine, and for those folks who are prayerful, this friend of mine just contracted coronavirus. His name is Robert O'Brien. And if you do pray, please include him in your prayers. He's the national security advisor right now in the White House. And he's a friend of mine since college. I mean, pre-political stuff and all that kind of a thing. He was a neighbor of mine when I was in college. And so he's now working in the White House. So he's made trips to Camp David. I sent him an early copy of the book, and he goes, "When were you at Camp David?" And I said, I was never at Camp David. He goes, no. You had to, there's stuff in your book. You had to have been there. And if you haven't been there, I want to know who you talked to. I want to know who gave you this information about Camp David. And I said, not going to say. My sources are secret. I'm not revealing them. So that was kind of nice to get that. You know, I worked really hard, particularly on that stuff, because I fell in love with the history of Camp David. And so I wanted to add, so many incredible things have happened there over different administrations. So whether it was the Camp David Accords with Jimmy Carter, whether it was Nixon entertaining, there's a great story in there about Nixon and Brezhnev, which is funny and scary, and I'd never heard it before. And what was it? Eisenhower and Khrushchev. They actually bunked together at Camp David and sat up watching old Westerns. Can you imagine two heads of state, Cold War, and these guys are bunking together in a cabin and sitting up all night watching Westerns like High Noon? So some of the stuff that I found was just fun. So that makes it rewarding, Chris, when you can find stuff that excites you as the writer. I don't outline. And I'm a big believer in the Robert Frost quote, which is no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. So I want to have that experience that the readers hopefully have when they're reading as I'm writing it. I want my palms to sweat, my heart to pound. I don't know what's going to happen next. And the joke in my house is because I paint my characters into corners that even I don't know how they're going to get out of. I'll come home and my wife can tell if it's a bourbon night or a red wine night based on the expression on my face. And she always says, "Don't worry, you'll figure it out tomorrow. You'll get them out of that corner." So that's a little bit about my process on research.
Well, you're well known as not as eschewing the outliner approach. But are you, so it sounds to me like you're pretty much 100% a pantser. And to explain that to the non-writers in the audience, there's the two schools of thought as outliners get everything all structured out in advance, and then they write their book according to their outline. And the pantsers are the seat of the pantsers. This is something we talk about ad nauseum in the writing world. Are you 100% pantser, or do you do a little planning ahead? I really like the fact, by the way, that you do write yourself into corners.
Yeah, I think if I'm painting myself into corners, if I don't know what's going to happen next, then the reader absolutely doesn't know what's going to happen next, because my mind works really fast. So if I get stuck and can't figure out how a character is going to get out of a certain situation, or how whatever the problem is going to be resolved, then I know I'm onto something good. It's stressful, Chris. So Dan Brown, the author of Da Vinci Code, Dan's a friend of mine, and my agent said at one point, Dan's a big outliner, Brad, and maybe it would be helpful for you if you were an outliner. And why don't you ask Dan if he'll share an outline with you? And Dan's so kind and so generous and just such a lovely guy. He shared the outline for Da Vinci Code with me. I mean, it was like this thick. Dan is like smart, crazy smart genius. And I got to see all the stuff that was left out of the final novel, which was really cool. And I'm like, okay, well, my agent said, try this. It might be interesting for your process. And I outlined a novel, and I got into writing it, and I hated it because I knew everything that was going to happen, and I abandoned that book. I didn't do it. because it just, again, Robert Frost, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. I just, it was boring for me. And to write a book every year, it really is seat of pants, a seat of chair. You can't wait for inspiration, as Jack London once said. You have to go after it with a club. So it really is about mental strength, but I need some surprise. I need to come in and not into my office, sit down here where I am. One thing I do though, Chris, is you can't see behind my computer here. This is a really cool kind of rolling desk that moves around and stuff. I have a white wall, and I assign real life actors and actresses the roles in my book, and I'll tape their pictures up to the wall. And I every time I've traveled, I've kept the little notepads that are by the telephone and everything, and I have those scattered all over my house. So if I get an idea, like people always say, where do you get your ideas? And I say, in the shower or after the second glass of wine, because that's when I'm relaxed. So I have these notepads all over. So when I do get an idea, I can write something down and I can tape that to the wall. It looks like the Russell Crowe movie or a organized crime squad going after a mafia family with all the stuff on the wall.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it looks like.
Well, you do more than I do. I mean, I like to know the beginning and the ending, and then I figure out the stuff in the middle. I do have to know the ending, but you don't do. You just arrive. But are you? I mean, the surprise of the writer, the Frost thing. I mean, that happens to you a lot, where you're going along and all of a sudden the character will do something you had no idea they were going to do. And why do you think that happens inside our brains?
Well, this is a real dangerous area for writers because your characters can take over if you're not careful. You still have to be, it's like adult daycare. You still have to have some supervision. You can't let them run in all the different directions. I actually had something that turned out to be a very interesting reveal of my main character, Scot Harvath. And by the way, for those of you folks who are watching tonight, I've got 20 books overall that I've written, 19 for Scot Harvath. I did a spin-off series about an all-female Delta Force unit called the Athena Project, where Scot played a little cameo. But I tell people my books are like the James Bond movies. You don't need to have ever seen one of the James Bond movies to jump in and enjoy the latest one. So now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, the characters. Yeah, so I had something happen a few books ago. My main character had actually been groomed by his mentor to take over the organization where he works. And it came to the point where his mentor was ill and said, I can't do this anymore. I need you to do it. And I typed out the words, no. I had no idea he was going to tell this man who'd become like a father to him and all this kind of stuff. No. And he did. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so those kind of surprises do happen for me as I go along. And again, if I'm surprising myself, then I'm not taking the easy way out. I'm not, engaging in tropes and all that kind of thing, which it is a real challenge when you write a repeat character, as you know, Chris, to keep it fresh for the readers and to reveal a little bit more of the character each time. We don't want James Bond or Indiana Jones to be changed at the end of the novel or the movie. We really want them to be the way they are. We want to go on a great adventure with them. So that's the balance. There's two balances I have to keep. One is revealing a little bit more about my main character and some of the supporting ones. Keep them fresh and interesting. And then the other one is what to leave out of the book, which is the advice that Elmore Leonard would give young writers, which is leave out all the parts that people skip. I get guys at the CIA that ride me and they're like, Thor, Harvath would have had 8 people between him and this other intelligence source. There would have been 8 cutouts. And I said, yeah, but nobody's going to sit and read through 8 chapters of him going through 8 meetings. I said, I'm not writing a training manual for you guys to use at the farm for new recruits. You go somebody else for that. I mean, I'm here. I want people to take my books to the lake, to the beach, and I'm in the entertainment business, particularly the escape business. So that's the other balance I have to be very good about is how do I make it as real as possible without boring you? I don't want anybody to skip. I used to read Clancy. I'd steal my parents' Clancy books all the time. And my dad, God bless him, he had a joke. He was convinced Clancy got paid by the word. That's why the descriptions of the guidance systems and the missiles were so long.
Yeah.
It's my dad. My dad's
stuff.
really funny. Yeah, it was his conspiracy theory. Clancy's paid by the word. That Clancy paid by the word. But I would snatch these books off the coffee table or the dining table or my parents' nightstand, and I'd read them like crazy. But now, as I'm a writer, I try to remember that Elmore Leonard thing of leaving out the parts people skip. But for me, it's not important how the missile works. What's cooler is that there's two guys hidden somewhere up in the mountains above that village, and they're shining a light that people can't see, a laser on the building, and that's what the missile's going to hit. That's the cool stuff. I don't need to know about gyroscopes or, I may talk about how fast the missile travels because some of that stuff is really cool, but if it's not really cool, it doesn't get into the book.
Well, it's interesting you talk about your Harvath as he's evolved, because you have evolved him, and there are plenty of series where the protagonists don't evolve. Which, and a lot of them I really like, like Spencer and Parker. I mean, he never changes a bit, but I love those books. I don't care. But Scott is definitely, and he's kind of had a really rough time lately. So I was curious how, and a friend of mine who knew I was going to do this wrote me and said, ask him about Scott getting kind of really screwed up with the alcohol, and he's depressed. He's really been beaten up and shoved into the ground. And I mean, how are you going to deal with that? Do you know how you're going to keep that going? I mean, does he keep getting worse, or you're going to have to stabilize him? Or?
I don't think so. So he's been really through the meat grinder in the last two books, without giving away too many spoilers. Last year's book, he was really through the meat grinder. This book picks up with him still in the grinder, and it's getting worse. He's going further down the funnel, and he's really getting ground pretty bad. But then he finds a reason to keep going, to actually kind of come out of that. And so darkness, this idea of darkness is a theme in Near Dark. I mean, the epigraph in the beginning is from Plato about darkness. There's the title Near Dark. There's this theme of darkness and demons. And what does it mean? What does it take, particularly for men and women that we ask to do some pretty dangerous and pretty disturbing things? What does it take to kind of emotionally and psychologically cup that sputtering flame of humanity that they have within them, to make sure it isn't extinguished, that they don't go completely cold and not feel anything anymore? So that was something I wanted to explore in this. And I wanted to give Harvath something to live for, something that's worth it, to convince him that, you need to you need to pull back on the yoke, because this is not working. This is really, really bad, and you're gonna corkscrew into the ground, as some of my paratrooper buddies say, and it's not going to be pretty. So I wanted to take him through hell, because he's going to continue to chase the devil in the future, and the best person to chase the devil is somebody who's already been through hell. That's a little kind of personal thing that I like to say.
It's a good line.
So I really wanted to put Harvath through it. I think. Yeah, I think it's a good one. And to tell you the truth, Chris, I took a lot of personal, professional risk. I really went outside my comfort zone with the last two books, particularly getting involved with the emotions of Scot Harvath and the psychology and what he was going through. I was not comfortable with that, because I was worried, am I revealing too much? Is it not enough? And you don't know. I mean, as authors, we're creating order out of chaos. There's no manual that says do only this much, and then in chapter 15, make sure you've done this, and then we don't know until we finish the book and we turn it in if it's even any good. I mean, I don't know anybody even Stephen King talks about it. He likes to finish his manuscripts and throw them in a drawer because they smell like a teenager's laundry hamper by the time he's done. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And I agree. You need to give it some time to kind of air out. So that stuff with Harvath, I think going forward, he's still going to have some demons. He still is broken. He's still, as I'm writing the new book, it's not as bad as it's been. He's pulling back on the yoke. He's getting better, but it isn't going to be just like, oh, he's back to his old self. There are some things. There's a little bit, I think, as we get older, particularly for characters I write like Harvath, they're less impulsive. There's more wisdom there. He's very impulsive as Near Dark opens up. He's making some really bad decisions. He's giving into a part of himself that he should not be giving into. So that doesn't necessarily disappear overnight, But what I loved about writing Near Dark was I wanted to create a character that was a female character that was just as strong and just as capable and just as damaged as Harvath. And maybe she's even a little bit better than him. Maybe she's a little bit smarter. She's definitely younger than him, and maybe she's got to step on him. And she's been through a lot too. So that's what I liked. You're an author. Maybe you can help me out here. I've been talking about this stupid example of the two of them. It's like dropping 2 coffee cups on the floor, on the tile floor in the kitchen, and you try to put the cups back together. You can only make one, and it's with pieces from both, and it's a Franken cup. It's all, you got the glue, and there's these jagged, if you grab it in the wrong place, you're going to cut your hand. But the cup is bigger and it's stronger put together the way it is than either of the 2 cups individually. So I like this idea that this woman had been through similar hell as Harvath, similar darkness, and that maybe she's going to be the one that actually leads them on the path out of the darkness.
Yeah, I think
not to belabor darkness.
Yeah, I've been reading rereading a lot of books of people that I really like, and you know, it's pretty common to have a opposite gender partner in these things that do exactly what you're saying, that flesh out the character and create different dimensions and so forth. And I have to have my guy has got to have a buddy. I mean, all my protagonists, I got to have a buddy there, and I've got to have somebody to work off of, even if it's a dog, which I do sometimes. And the other thing that you're famous for is getting ahead of geopolitical movements and forces and so forth, to the extent to which, as Jennifer alluded to, they hired you to kind of speculate about what risks our country could be facing. Do you think that's going to be harder in the future? Do you think, I mean, the way things are changing so quickly and it's so complex, do you ponder that?
Yeah. So the place that the battle space, if you will, that I'm in now, and that has informed kind of the last 3 books, is I've been really concerned personally, and it gets reflected in the novels. I've been concerned that we have a very war-weary public. We've been in Afghanistan and Iraq a long, long time. And when Putin, so just a real quick history lesson for everybody who's watching. When the Soviet Union broke up, about 1/3 of their nukes were in Ukraine. And we convinced the Ukrainians to agree to decommission those nukes with our help. And they said, well, we're going to need some assurances, because nukes are a good thing to have. Nobody invades you if you have nukes. And we said, no, please get rid of them. You guys are going to lose them. Terrorists are going to steal them. We'll protect you. We'll make sure nobody invades you. You don't lose any sovereign territory. And that was our promise to Ukraine. And Ukraine said, okay, get the Russians to sign that piece of paper. I'm thinking, boy, you guys didn't learn much if you think a signature on a piece of paper from the Russians means anything. But okay, everybody signed. But then Putin went in and he grabbed Crimea, which I believe in the Francis Fukuyama saying, which is history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And Putin's excuse for going in and grabbing Crimea was the same excuse that Hitler used to go into Czechoslovakia and grab the Sudetenland, where it was, oh, just protecting native German speakers. Putin's thing was, just protecting native Russian speakers. And it was a BS excuse. So as I looked at that, that's, by the way, why we have a G7 now, because Putin was in Russia were thrown out of the G8 and it shrank by 1 member. So as I look at Russia, my big concern has been, so we have the NATO organization, and in our charter is Article 5, which says an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. So it's a very Justice League kind of a thing. We're going to come to the defense of any NATO allies. The problem is that Putin wants to grab back Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And my concern has been, there's a lot of Americans that couldn't find Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia on a map, and they might not want to send their sons and daughters to go over and recapture Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And another big deal is the Rand Corporation war-gamed what would happen if Putin tried to grab one or all 3 of those, and they used American generals and did red team, blue team. Putin won every single time. We were not able to stop him. So I thought, okay, what would this look like in the fiction world? What about this idea that by the way, Article 5 in the NATO Charter was only exercised once, and we did it in the United States after 9/11. We pulled the trigger on that and asked our NATO allies to help us in Afghanistan. So if we took kind of the current situation, all my stuff's fictionalized. I don't have a President Obama that who's the office then went to President Trump. It's all fictionalized. But I thought, what if we had a president who noticed that Russia could be a problem and that didn't want us to go to war and said to my guy, hey, I'm going to let Scot Harvath go and do whatever it takes. I'm going to look the other direction and let Harvath go do whatever it takes to prevent us getting dragged into war in Europe. And the more I read about this, the more experts, whether it's State Department people, different geopolitical people, different intelligence community people, I'm really convinced this is like the next Cold War kind of an area, that this is really a big deal. So I've woven that into my thrillers lately, and I think it's fun. I think, you know, that's one of those things that people end up Googling while they're reading the books, going, is this true? Is this, I had a huge broadcaster who interviewed me. I mean, really big, one of the smartest people I know, say, Brad, I didn't know that Russia had this exclave, this territory that's disconnected from Russia in Europe, right above Poland. He said, I didn't know. That. And he was, so kind of neat.
Yeah, it's great. Like I said, I was going to jump around. Diversity. I've always believed that
jumping
having
it up for you. Yeah.
I've always believed that and I'm proud to say that my books from day one were chock-a-block with very diverse characters. And because I think it serves art, because it's more interesting to have people from all over. And I also think there's a certain social good and, and spreading stuff around to all kinds of, and I know a lot of different kinds of people. How do you think thrillers could be changed in the future, given, I think, a greater awareness now for the need to have more attention to more diverse populations, or not?
I don't think we should place filters or limits on art, to be honest with you, Chris. I think if it's in your heart and you feel called by your muse to give greater voice to certain people in the lovely communities in which we live, I think that's great. But I really do believe that you have to tell the story you want to tell, and that you shouldn't, you should never do it about how, it's like Stephen King said, you should write what you love to read, because that's where your passion is. And I say that because I don't think any writer looks at the different genres and says, you know, I grew up reading Le Carré, but boy, that Nick Sparks, woo, does he make the money? I'm going to write about, a Notebook, and I'm going to do maybe a little bit of Bridges of Madison County, and you try to Frankenstein a romance in there. So I really do believe you have to do what you feel called. It's got to be the story. I think Thoreau said it best, which is, and this plays into your question, I think Thoreau said it best, and I'm going to butcher it, but Thoreau said something along the lines of how arrogant it is to sit down and write when you have never stood up and lived. And so I think the broader your experience, the broader your acquaintance, the better writer you become. Just like you have to be a great reader to be even a halfway decent writer. You can't be a writer without being an incredible reader. And I also think that a certain amount of compassion and an ear for listening to people, and we're all the heroes in our own story, right? So if you can pull that out of people, I love, this is what's killing me with the whole COVID thing. I shouldn't say killing me with the COVID thing. That's actually bad. I love to observe people. I love to observe people. And I can't do that now. I can't really sit in a cafe and watch conversations and all that kind of stuff, because I think that's what makes you definitely a better author, is that if you can explore lives, particularly if those lives are different than your own, I think that gives you a bigger toolbox to draw from, and it makes you a better writer. So yeah, you can write about, one group of people or whatever. It depends, again, on what story you want to tell, what your readers want to read. But that's the greatest thing I love about being a writer, is that I was a reader long before I ever became a writer. And I say that love of books is a shared language. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter how you vote, what's in your bank account. None of that stuff matters. If you love books and I love books, oh my God, we could talk on and on and on and on, and it's not going to stop. And I think that's one of the coolest things. Books really are an escape and a getaway and a shared language. So I miss going to my bookstore. I miss, and I chat everybody up at my little indie. What are you reading? You know, people are like, who's this guy? But they don't take it as an offense. You know, it's like, you're in the bookstore. We're all here because we love books. And so I've made more kind of neat little startup friendships and stuff just by bugging people in the bookstore. So I miss that.
Yeah, I agree with you, by the way, that the characters have to be organic to the story has to come first, and they have to grow out of out of the fiction. And but like I said, I do think that mixing things up and having a lot of complicated, different, quirky people makes it much more interesting. In addition to, you know, and I agree with you on developing character.
We can relate. Life is complicated.
Life is really complicated, and I also miss the interaction like you do. People have said, well, where do you get all these quirky characters? And I say, I sit on a park bench on Main Street, and I just watch them walk by. A lot of them we got dogs, so people will stop and talk to the dogs, and they'll give you a whole life story in 5 minutes that, you know, you could never come up with on your own. So it's the best part about it. I need to ask Jennifer if she wants to step in, because we're past our half hour. Are you there, Jennifer?
It gets to take some questions, huh?
I think so.
Magically reappear. There she is.
There she is.
All right.
Magic.
I'm sorry, it only takes a second after I get the cue to come up. Oh my goodness. I also got a little distracted because I was just so enjoying your conversation so much to think about. And I was thinking too, wow, I wish I went to the same little indie bookstore that Brad Thor goes to, and we could like talk about books there. That would be fun.
You can come to my park bench. I can show you where the park bench is. You can hang out there.
Do. That sounds fun.
We can be socially distant on the park
Socially
bench.
distant. There's plenty of room. Wear masks.
We can do that. Well, speakers who come to the Mark Twain House always comment on how great the questions from our audiences are. And tonight is no exception. We've got a lot of really good ones. So I'm going to jump right in. And I'll just start with there are a number of people who want to know about movies and the potential for movie versions of your stories. Brad, can you talk about that at all?
So the short, yeah, no, I can. I'm under a non-disclosure. I can't talk about the names, but we have, for a town as filled with beautiful people as Los Angeles, as Hollywood is, I have kissed every frog in that community. I have been left at the altar so many times on movie deals that now I don't even talk about them if we get one, because but I will say this, for every deal that didn't happen, the people we're with now, these are household names. If I told you who this was, you'd be go, oh my gosh, that's your producer? Wait, that's your director? I've seen all their movies. So we're in a really good place right now. And the nice thing is that with the shutdown because of coronavirus, it's not stopping us from working. So we're putting together the final financing package, and is it going to be a studio release, or are we going to go to a streaming service? So there's a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff that they're going to get to make the announcement on, and then I will follow up and put it out on Facebook and social media and all that kind of stuff. But yes, we're in the best place I've ever been in my career. But as I say to everybody, I'll really believe it when I'm sitting in the theater, bag of popcorn, and the lights go down, and the screen opens up, and there's the beginning of my movie. I'll believe it then.
And if all goes without a hitch, when might we expect that to happen?
I don't know. That's the big thing now. Is they said, Brad, working on your books, it's like the Marvel universe. We could start with any book, and so what we're doing now is we're trying to figure out which book really, as we're breaking down the books and all this kind of stuff and rereading them, which book could we take if coronavirus doesn't get better here soon and go overseas to a country where there's no coronavirus and shoot there? Which book would be the right one to do that, and also be the one for us to kick off this big franchise for the fans? So there's a little bit of a guessing game going right now as we try to figure this out. And we're also rounding out the team so that we have all the creative people on board. They're reading the books now as they get hired. And then we've got our big kind of summit where we're going to say, okay, are we going to go to New Zealand? There's no coronavirus there. They've got great film crews and great post-production facilities. So do we take this project there? And if we take it there, then we have to figure out, okay, what do the landscapes look like? What do the buildings look like? What could different places in New Zealand stand in for? And then they're going to say, okay, Brad, which one of your books do you think is best suited to be filmed in New Zealand if we're going to pretend that New Zealand is something else? So there's all these little moving pieces.
That is fascinating. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. We'll be waiting with bated breath to learn more. So one of our stalwarts here tonight, Anne, who's been very helpful in helping moderate the chat with me tonight. Thank you, Anne. Says, I used to read Clancy when I was probably way too young as well. Do you encourage your kids to read more advanced books, or do they get to pick their own books?
So they are 15, almost 16, and 17, almost 18. So they pick their own books. I mean, and we are bottomless buyers of books. They want books, we buy their books. We really believe in that. In fact, one of the coolest things that I learned from the book Freakonomics is we're all taught that if we want our children to be great readers, we should read to them. And that's long been this kind of almost folktale that we're told about reading. And yeah, it's great for bonding with your kids. It's really important. But when they did studies for the book Freakonomics, what they found out is the greatest determinant as to whether or not your kids will be great readers is, do they see you reading? And are there books in your home? And that's a big thing. So we have always had tons and tons of bookshelves. I mean, you can see some behind me and they go down the walls back here. We've always been big readers. One of my children read Harry Potter in kindergarten. I mean, it really got to the point where they were devouring books faster than I could read them to them. They wanted to read on their own. So they've been big lovers of books. So I let them. I didn't want them jumping into dad's books right away because there was some adult content and everything. So I did kind of make them wait till later in grade school, kind of 7th grade. They're so mature too. I'm blessed with 2 super smart, very mature children. So I probably let them jump in a little bit earlier than, if you ask me, how old should a child be before they read your books, Brad? I'm going to jack that way up because I don't want you mad at me because now your kids are saying this or doing that or.
Right. Fair enough. So David McEntee wants to know, will Scot Harvath ever hook up with Mitch Rapp to take on some super threat to America? And he adds, may Vince Flynn, R.I.P., rest in peace. Brad Thor is his successor in my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, David.
Oh, well, thank you. David, thank you for such a great question. You know, it's funny, Kyle Mills, who's now writing the Mitch Rapp character for the Vince Flynn estate, Kyle was a friend of mine before I ever even became an author. It's really small world. Kyle's dad was in the FBI, and then my dad's best friend, who was like an uncle / godfather to us, was in the FBI. So I knew Kyle for years before I became an author. It's really funny. At one point, I wanted to do some writing work with Kyle a long time ago, and I talked to my publisher, and she had said, no, people don't binge. This is like before Netflix and everything. 1 book a year is good. If you do more than that, you're gonna oversaturate your audience. You're gonna drown them. And so it didn't happen. Kyle and I did not work together on that. You know, it's an interesting question. A lot of people would love to see Harvath and Mitch Rapp come together. I think it would be really a cool thing to do. Of course, this is out of our control. It would come down to Vince's widow, Lisa, and if she wanted to do something like that, and then how committed Kyle and I are. Because we each write our own books every year. So to combine on something means that's a second book we'd be working on, and it would be a second book that we'd be 50-50 on. So from a business standpoint, you're now putting in pretty much all the same work you would for 50% of a book with somebody else. But if the fans like go crazy for it, it may be cool. And it might be that we would start smaller with maybe a novella or something like that and kind of, you know, test market it a little bit. But I love Kyle. So David, you could have asked me about working with any author. You couldn't have picked a better person than Kyle Mills. He is, honest to God, one of the nicest, most talented, smartest people you could ever meet. And he's super kind. So yeah, if I got the opportunity to do something like that, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Oh, I think we're all kind of hoping it happens, because that would be like two really, really nice guys working together on something really fun. And that's a good segue into my question. And I promised you two before we started that I had a question for you. And this is for both Chris and Brad. You have strong names for your heroes, your main characters. How do you come up with these names that are so perfect and so apt for these characters? And you can just focus on the main characters if you like.
Well, my character, Sam Aquillo, which is spelled Acquillo. I think it means little waters. I'm not sure. But in any event, the house that I'm sitting in right now here on Long Island was built by my wife's dear childhood friend, whose name was John Aquino. And we used to joke about how Kerouac would take the names of people that he knew and he would just change them a little tiny bit so that he could stay legally sound. But if you knew the biographies, you would know right away. I mean, it was a dumb thing that we just chatted about. He's a very literate guy. And in any event, so I named my guy Sam Aquillo as a joke to amuse my friend John Aquino. And that's how that happened. And even though you didn't ask it, I will answer, because this came up in my my thing that I did with the Writers Weekend the other day about naming other characters. One of my answers is, you just go online and look up baby names. You got boy names, you got girl names, you got surnames from all over the world. If you're ever stuck doing that, there's literally thousands of them at the touch of a finger, and you just have to kind of curate what you think sounds good. It's a piece of cake.
Awesome. How about you, Brad?
So my protagonist is named Scot with one T, because he's named after my brother, because my mom did not want Scottthor. And I had so many readers ask why only one T that I eventually used the same story, but said his middle name is Thomas, Scott Thomas Harvath, and his mom didn't want Scottthormas. And then his last name, Harvath, is actually a friend who works in the federal government going after bad guys, terrorists and whatnot. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So another of our fans here this evening, James Stotler, says as Harvath gets toward retirement, do you think you will write prequels, maybe Harvath SEAL or Secret Service Days?
I've got it. That's a great question. I've got an interesting idea that I've harbored for a long time about Harvath's first mission as a SEAL. Actually, it's something that does not go well. And I've thought about doing that. There are certain things you could really be careful when you go back in time that you get the details right. The songs on the radio, the kind of beer he's drinking, where he's drinking that beer. I'll get hammered by Texans if I go back and have him drinking a Lone Star beer in a place that they're like, no, the Lone Star beer, you couldn't get Lone Star beer in Long Island or something like that. So, yeah, that's a lot of work. But I so enjoy looking over the horizon and trying to figure out what's going to happen next globally, that going back in time is not necessarily really high on my list right now. I've got so many more ideas of what I want to do with Harvath moving forward. But it'd be fun. I mean, obviously, Vince Flynn did that with Mitch Rapp with American Assassin and did a fantastic job, just kind of how Mitch Rapp was born, so to speak, and what he did at the beginning of his career. And I think when you have such a lovely, devoted audience, they would love to get a glimpse into some of those early things.
From what we've heard from you too, I think you would have fun going back and researching all those details and getting them all down pat when the time is right. Maybe.
It might be fun. It might be very daunting too. I pride myself on getting things correct. And I suppose if you set it up in such a way that you didn't have to bombard the reader with details, right? So it was happening on one of the lesser islands in Hawaii, the lesser inhabited islands in Hawaii or something like that, and the Navy was doing something there, blah, 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 blah. There may be a way to insulate him from needing it to be too detail rich, where I wouldn't be concerned. I'm a perfectionist, so it bugs me when I get something wrong. It really does, or there's a typo that we didn't, and it's funny, 15 people look at the manuscript. I look at it 4, 5, 6 times, and I know what the sentence is supposed to say, and I still miss stuff. So, and that always bugs me. I'm just, ugh.
No. Jimmy Hernandez, thank you for this, Jimmy, wants to know what up-and-coming authors in your style do you find will intrigue us as much as you do? Do you have any?
Well, there's one I can give you right off the bat, and his name is Jack Carr. And his 3rd novel was just published in the spring. He was able to hit the New York Times bestseller list for the first time. And Jack, I actually got to know Jack before he was published because Jack was a SEAL, Navy SEAL, who became an author. And he's friends with one of my best friends who was a SEAL as well. And I joke with Jack Carr. I said, boy, he always wanted to be a SEAL and an author. And I said, so did I, except you did it in the right order. I can't go and be a SEAL now. I went and became an author first, and now the SEAL community, there's no way they'll touch a guy like me now. So, but he's a great, great writer, and somebody I'd suggest if you like this genre, he's the future, and he's a fabulous writer and just a terrific, terrific human being. And Chris, I don't know what your experience has been, but I'll tell you from everybody I've met, particularly the International Thriller Writers Association, with our annual gatherings, whether it's Clive Cussler, Nelson DeMille has been incredibly generous to me, particularly when I started out. I don't meet bad people in this industry. There's something about writers and booksellers and people who work with books and writers. They just seem to be the nicest people in the world.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I published my first mystery, I knew nothing about the community, zero. I knew so little, but I got the thing published, and then I went out there and started to learn about it. And I went to BoucherCon, I went to Thriller Fest, and all these things, and I was astonished at how welcoming and helpful and generous everybody was. Mysteries and thrillers are a little different. There's an overlap in the middle, but all the people I've met throughout this whole sector of literature have been fantastic. And I've made a lot of really, really close friends now as a consequence of that. People that I really, we've developed kind of rich associations, and they're statesmen of these different, but people who are like big deals, who are so generous of their time and attention. You can talk to them, they'll talk to you. There's no condescension, there's none of that crap. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. There's a little bit of a delay. I was just going to warn you, there's 2 authors though that you need to stay the hell away from, and that's Steve Berry and James Rollins. They both cheat at cards. I lent Rollins my car once. He kept it for 2 days. This is my rental in New York City. And Steve, actually, they're 2 of my oldest friends, and I tease them relentlessly. And they do the same to me. And one year, Steve Berry had this really fun idea, and he said, Brad, we're good friends. Let's do an Easter egg in our books where each one of us over the next couple of books will make mention of the other person's main character. And so we did that, and somebody noticed in Steve Berry's book and reached out to me on Facebook and said, Scot Harvath is in Steve Berry's book. And I said, what? I said, I'm going to sue that son of a gun into the ground. I'm going to get F. Lee Bailey. I will bury him. Johnny Cochran. I'm going to the whole dream team, and I'm going to bury Steve Berry in legal fees. And we had the greatest time, and people are like, yeah, you go get him. He shouldn't put. And then James Rollins did it. And I'm like, God, did James Rollins? So that's just those guys are like my brothers, because we got into the business very similar time together and knew each other from the beginning of the International Thriller Writers Association. So I'm glad that you've had the same experience that I have. Book people are the best people. Any part in the process. They're like theater people. They're wonderful human beings.
I agree. And I pick up these Easter eggs all the time when I read my friends, because I always really want to read my friends so that I want to be current with their work. And I don't think I've ever mentioned it, but I go, oh, I know what you're doing there. I know who that is. or I recognize a name that, you know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. It just happened the other day with something I was reading. It's a gas.
Well, we're getting close to running out of time. How can we take maybe one or two more questions, you guys? Does that work for you? And Brad,
Sure.
yes,
I've got a lightning storm, a big thunderstorm. There's lightning, and if you lose me, because I'm a little bit rural here in Tennessee, if you lose me, don't take it personally. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Chris. But I'm watching it really start to crackle outside, and we do lose power. So my thanks to both of you right now. If I do disappear, that's why. It's nothing like, oh, I didn't like that question. I'm out.
I am glad you explained that to us. We would have worried. So just really quickly, a number of people have asked kind of who inspired you to start writing in the first place. And before you answer that, I just wanted to point out that we're not asking you to say Mark Twain is one of your literary heroes, but that the Fukuyama quote about history doesn't repeat, but history rhymes, that is very commonly misattributed to Mark Twain. And that's one of the ones
Mark Twain?
that,
Wow.
Yeah, and he didn't say that, but he gets, people say he said it all the time.
Did he say, Jennifer, one of the ones that people attribute to Clancy that I attribute to Mark Twain, and I may be incorrectly attributing it to him, is the quote, the difference between fiction and reality is people expect fiction to make sense.
I'm going to have to check on that one, Brad. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to check on that, but I will check on that.
Nice to have a contact at the Mark Twain House.
You do have a contact at the Mark Twain House. And you know what I'll do? I will put the answer in the chat so that anybody who's interested in the answer can come back. The chat continues when the program is ended, and everybody can come back and watch the replay of this anytime they like, and you can continue to chat among yourselves. So I'll pop back in and share that answer. So going back to the question where we started, who influenced you? I mean, you talked about Tom Clancy, but who, and it doesn't even have to be a writer, who inspired you to start writing?
It's, people say, why'd you become a writer? And I said, for the same reason, that Davy Berkowitz became a serial killer because his dog told him to do it. It's like I get these voices in my head and I have to get them out. There is no choice. There are writers that I loved growing up. Alexander Dumas and The Count of Monte Cristo was the original cliffhanger, in my opinion, because he was serializing it in a French newspaper to get people to buy the next edition. So you had to end with something cool to make people come back. So Alexander Dumas, and then of course, all the people my parents read. I started out reading the Hardy Boys until I started stealing the Ludlum, Le Carre, Freddie Forsyth, and Clancy books. And that was just, it was just such a wonderful, rich world. I loved it. I couldn't get enough. Ian Fleming, the James Bond novels, I've got very early editions of those. My wife gave me as a beautiful gift, which was kind of neat. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you beyond your thunderstorm. You should probably go take cover in your basement with like a pan over your head or something. Thank you so much, both of you. What a wonderful evening. And it's just been so delightful. And thank you for sharing so much about your writing process and your books. And to our audience, thank you for your enthusiasm and your good questions and your support of the Mark Twain House and Museum. So we are very, very grateful. And we hope to see you all, including Chris and Brad, back often. Thank you, everybody.
Jennifer. You run a good ship here. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for interviewing me, Chris. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, sir. It was a real pleasure.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye. You too.
Oh,
Thank you.
Too.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.